short years later, his place to visit, he was a professor down south. They were socializing. He says, God, finally says, I'm here because, another reason why I'm here is because you still have that, because he wrote it on a scroll, and he gave it to Keith Jamieson. He says, do you still have that?
Great.
He said,
We are shifting gears to
sure, I have it back.
S13.
He was broke, thought it was worth something.
Yesterday, so hopefully we still have it. And Michael's going to walk us through the bill. We're going to hear from a lot of witnesses this week on this bill, so get ready.
Get ready. You're on to your seats.
Fair warning, I think there's 16 of them already on there.
This is Michael Grave with Counsel. I'm going to walk through this one. Do you all have the ASCAS version?
Yes, we do. Ask us
So this would add a new chapter, subchapter of law to NBSA Chapter 159, the chapter related to the waste management in the state. The new chapter would relate to single-use carryout bags, expanded polystyrene food service products, and single-use plastic straws. The key components of this bill really are the definitions. It effectively set who is subject to the requirements and what is subject to the requirements. The first key definition is carryout bag. The bag provided by a store or food service establishment to a customer at the point of sale, and it's not a pharmacy bag. So a store is later defined on page 4 as a grocery store, supermarket, convenience store, liquor store, dry cleaner, pharmacy, drugstore, or other retail establishment that has over 1,000 square feet of retail space. So this requirement applies to those stores with 1,000 square feet of retail space.
And it's my understanding that comes because of is that from another state's
The
model?
other jurisdictions use that threshold, yes.
But otherwise it's, I mean, we know why they chose that?
It's basically to draw a line at big versus small.
Yeah.
Just a clarification. So 1,000 feet or less, this does not apply.
Whenever the requirements address a store or food service, a store, it does not apply.
Okay.
Then the definition of food service establishment is included, but it just cross-references the existing definition in 18 VSA 4301. And those are basically entities that prepare, serve, and sell food to the public. So stores, 1,000 feet or more of retail space, and then people who prepare, sell, and food to the public are subject to the carryout ban. Then you get a definition of expanding polystyrene. I'm not going to go through this, but effectively it's styrofoam. That's the brand name for what expanding polystyrene is. Then you see what an expanded polystyrene food service product is.
Can I just ask, is the definition of expanded polystyrene also from other states, or where did that come?
It's from Maryland. It's a product made of expanded polystyrene that is used for selling or providing food or beverages and is intended by the manufacturer to be used once for eating or generally recognized by the public as an item to be discarded after one use. It includes food containers, plates, hot and cold beverage cup trays, cartons for eggs or other food. It does not include food or beverages that have been packaged in expanded polystyrene outside the state for receipt by a food service establishment or store. A product made of expanded polystyrene that is used to package raw, uncooked, or regular meat, fish, poultry, and food. A non-foam polystyrene food service product. We already went through the definition of food service establishment, definition of plastic. This is the scientific definition of synthetic material made by linking monomers to chemical reactions to create a polymer chain that can be molded or extruded at high heat into various solid forms. Then you get reusable carryout bag. It's a carryout bag that's specifically designed and manufactured for multiple reuse, and that is made of cloth or other machine washable fabric that has handles, that is a non-woven polypropylene bag that has handles, that is a durable plastic bag that has handles and at least 2.25 mils thick, or made of paper or other material that is not plastic, has handles, and has a thickness of 2.25 mils. So mil is 1/1000th of an inch. And I would like to note that sub D there was added basically in a floor amendment. There might be some issues about whether a paper bag is a reusable bag. In other jurisdictions, reusable bag is often defined by the number of uses it has. For example, up to 125 uses. And so the question is, would paper bag really be appropriate under the reusable definition? Then you get to the definition of single-use paper bag. It's a carryout bag made of paper or other material that is not plastic, that has a thickness of less than 2.25 mils, and that is not a reusable grocery bag. Single-use plastic carryout bag means carryout bag made of plastic that has a thickness of less than 2.25 mils, and so remember, that's the threshold. If you're under 2.25 mils, that is the threshold for how you are going to be regulated. Then there's the definition of single-use plastic straw, a tube made of plastic that is used to transfer liquid from a container to the mouth of the person drinking the liquid. Designed and intended to be used only once, generally recognized by the public as an item that is to be discarded after one use. We already went through the definition of store, and in page 4, new section 6692. A store or food service establishment shall not provide a single-use plastic carryout bag to a customer. So, 1,000 foot or more retail establishments or somebody providing, an entity providing food shall not provide a single-use plastic carryout bag, so something that's 2.25 mils or less, and is designed for one use, and is provided at the point of sale. And that is what the prohibition is on. The single-use paper carryout bag, store or food service establishment may provide a single-use paper carryout bag at the point of sale if the single-use paper carryout bag is provided to the consumer for a charge of not less than 5 cents per bag. So we stop right there. This provision is included because there was testimony and some evidence that when jurisdictions ban single-use plastic bags and don't have a fee on paper bags, it just shifts consumer choice to those single-use paper bags and therefore doesn't have a significant effect on solid waste reduction. And it doesn't drive the consumer to use a reusable bag. So that's why it's there. It was 10 cents as it came out of the Senate Natural Resources Committee. There was a floor amendment to make it 5. Many jurisdictions have 10, some have 5. Some jurisdictions exempt certain individuals, such as people receiving SNAP or WIC. And so there's some consideration there. And then on page 4, sub B, all monies collected by a store or food service establishment under this section for provision of a single carry-out paper bag shall be retained by the store or food service establishment. So that is basically an incentive for the food service establishment to provide these bags and to effectively help cover the costs that they would have in providing the bags. People have questioned why and whether you can mandate that they keep the fee. So basically this is a regulatory fee. It's not an administrative fee, a fee to pay for the cost of a program. It's a regulatory fee, an incentive or a disincentive fee. Another regulatory fee that you can think of is the wetlands permitting fee. It's a 75-cent per square foot fee. That is not related to the administrative services provided by A&R. It is in part a disincentive fee, a regulatory fee. This is a regulatory fee, and in other jurisdictions, namely California, when this provision was challenged, the courts have said the regulator can delegate who gets to collect the fee and disposition of that regulatory fee. So that's what you were doing.
What was that last?
Yes, Representative LaFave.
If I were a retailer and chose not to charge anyone for a paper bag upon request, would I be against violating the law?
Yes.
So I'm obligated under this bill now
Well,
to
as
charge any.
it has to be a single-use paper bag, so one that's under 2.25 mils, as this is drafted.
Wait, the paper thickness is the same as the plastic thickness? Okay. Representative Odie.
The last sentence, you said it's not an administrative fee and the courts have what? What's that?
The courts have said, namely in California, that when this provision was challenged, that the state could delegate an entity to collect that regulatory fee, effectively delegating the responsibility for making them effectively an actor for the state, and they can direct the disposition of that. So, page 4, 6694, single-use plastic straws. Food service establishment shall not sell or provide a single-use plastic straw to a customer, except that a food service establishment shall provide a single-use plastic straw to a person on request. Move on.
Did they have?
All right. Representative Odie, we're gonna try to focus on the understanding the bill.
Okay.
Then in page 4, 6695, this is expanded polystyrene food service products, a person. And you may want to relook at whether it should say a food service establishment or store. But a person shall not sell or offer for sale in the state an expanded polystyrene food service product. A store or food service establishment shall not sell or provide food or beverages in an expanded polystyrene food service product. This section shall not prohibit a person from storing or packaging a food or beverage in an expanded polystyrene food service product for distribution out of the state.
Why does it say person?
That question came up on the Senate floor, and it really was, they wanted that provision about sale to be broader than food service establishments or stores. But then it kind of creates a little bit of confusion in the civil penalties provision, where it says a person who violates the requirements. And there are questions like, well, if I'm the person that gives out the straw, the teenager working in the summer, am I the one that gets the penalty? So I think there could be some clarity either provided to the expanded polystyrene provision or the civil penalty provision. So if you want to say a person, you want the sale provision for expanded polystyrene to be broad and the penalty for that to be a person, I think you might want to work through some of that language. But otherwise, the requirements are on stores and food service establishments.
For the bag.
For the bags and the straws.
Representative McCall.
So then person, in some C here is not, person in other arenas means companies.
There is no definition of person, so the default definition of person would apply from Title I, and it is pretty much every legal entity you can think of.
It's a legal entity and not a human.
No, it isn't human. It's any.
Including. Okay. Yeah.
That takes you to page 5, 6696, the civil penalties. Person who violates the requirement shall receive a written warning for a first offense. A first offense is no violation. Shall be subject to a civil penalty of $25 for a second offense, and be subject to a civil penalty of $100 for a third or subsequent offense. And for purposes of enforcement, an offense shall be each day a person is violating the requirement of this chapter. Should I move on?
Yeah.
So there's rulemaking authority that A&R would have to adopt rules to implement the requirements of the subchapter. And then you get to section 2, but before I get to section 2, there are a couple of things that I just want to reference. First, there are a lot of municipalities out there that have bag bills as it is. The question of whether or not this should supersede those bag bills was raised. The Senate wants those jurisdictional ordinances to remain in effect while this section 2 working group looks at them and how they work. But you're in that, and that was their intent, stated on the floor. But there is some uncertainty about when this goes into effect, section 1, what happens to all those other municipal ordinances and bylaws. Does this supersede them? Is this a minimum? Can municipalities be more strict? Right now, it's unclear, and that's partly because effectively the chair of Senate Natural wanted this working group to look at the different examples out there and see how they work. So you either answer that way, as the Senate did, or you look potentially to clarify how this applies to those municipal jurisdictions that have a bylaw or an ordinance regulating.
Okay.
There is one other issue that you are going to hear from your colleagues and your constituents. It's going to be about every scenario, about every type of bag, right?
It's already started.
What about the candy bag? What about the produce bag? What about the dry cleaner bag, right? And what about the bag that my newspaper is delivered? Actual question, because one of the senators was concerned that he wouldn't have a bag to walk his dog with. So it's like, there you're gonna get all of those. The Senate committee's position was that the bag provided at the point of sale, right? At the point of sale, at the register. But they did provide a provision, that exemption for a pharmacy bag, because, you know, when you get your pharmaceuticals, it's often at the register. And so they wanted to be clear that that bag was not subject to this provision. But in other jurisdictions, the exemptions are more specific. Produce bags, dry cleaning bags, there are other examples. So you either take the position that it's at the point of sale, at the register, or you may want to look at some more specific exemptions.
Can I just, what are the rules that are anticipated being needed for this implementation?
So in those jurisdictions that have adopted it, I'm thinking like, well, a similar version like DC, Austin, some of the California municipalities. They found that they needed to address some specific details about certain types of bags, exemptions, things of that nature. And so the rulemaking has been needed in some of the other jurisdictions.
Thank you. Representative Cullen, did you?
I'm gonna hold, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
What about mobile fast food trucks?
The definition of food service establishment includes those.
Oh, just checking if it can be stationary or mobile.
So one of the interesting things about the definition of food service establishment, the statutory definition is not the same as the regulatory definition. And so the Department of Health, who regulates food service establishments, has made some distinctions. And it's largely around those places like grocery stores where you have food sold in bulk, but then you have the sandwich area or fried chicken area or bakery area. And so they've made a distinction where the food is served for immediate consumption, that's the food service establishment, and not the entire full retail supermarket. And so there's distinctions that have been made at a regulatory level about what's the food service establishment and what's not.
Does that set us up for inherent conflicts in this bill?
No, I don't think so, because the way that DOH does it, and you could incorporate the DOH regulatory, the rule definition of food service establishment. But I think the way that it's where the food is provided for immediate consumption of the people. And then you get to the single-use products working group. There are many of the same definitions that were in the regulatory sections. The charge begins on page 7. The single-use products working group is created to evaluate current state municipal policy and requirements for management of unwanted single-use products, and to recommend to you the General Assembly policy or requirements that the state should enact to improve statewide management of single-use products.
Hold on one second. Took me a second to catch up through the definitions, so. Okay.
So they're gonna recommend to you policy or requirements that the state should enact to improve statewide management of single-use products, divert single-use products from disposal in landfills, and prevent contamination of natural resources. There's a whole membership. There's a member of the Senate, a member of the House, Secretary of Natural Resources, a representative of a materials recovery facility in Murph, 2 representatives from solid waste management entities, a representative from VLCT, and a representative of an association or group representing manufacturers or distributors of single-use products, and a representative of an environmental advocacy group, 2 representatives of scores for food service establishments. Then you'll see the powers and duties of the group. We'll evaluate the success of existing state and municipal requirements for management of single-use products. They'll evaluate the availability and the utility of compostable single-use products. They'll estimate the cost of the state from municipalized management of unwanted single-use products. They'll estimate other costs of management or failure to manage unwanted single-use products. They'll summarize the effects on the environment and natural resources, failure to manage them properly. They'll recommend methods or mechanisms for improving the life cycle management of single-use products, including whether the state should establish extended producer responsibility requirements for manufacturers, distributors, or brand owners. And then page 10, if extended producer responsibility for single-use products are recommended, and that's a typo, it should be subdivision 6, not subdivision 5. The single-use products to be included under the requirements, financial incentive for manufacturers, distributors, owners, etc. of single-use products to minimize environmental impacts. How to structure requirements for manufacturers, distributors, or brand owners to provide for or finance the collection of the single-use products, including using the existing infrastructure for collection, processing, and recycling of products. And an estimate of the cost and benefits of any recommended method or mechanism. The working group gets the administrative, technical, financial, and legal assistance of A&R, the Department of Health, the Office of Legislative Counsel, and Joint Fiscal Office. On or before December 1, 2019, they submit their report to you, the General Assembly, including their findings and recommendations. They have to call their first meeting on or before July 1, 2019. The group exists until February 1st, 2020. people get compensation, including legislators for participation.
Does it say who the chair would be?
No, it didn't. It says the committee shall select a chair from among its members. So then you get to the effective dates. The working group takes effect on passage because it has to meet before July 1, 2019. And the single-use products provisions take effect July 1, 2020. So you get the working group report back next year before all the single-use provisions go into effect. You can amend the single-use provisions and or address how it supersedes or affects municipal bylaws or ordinances at that time.
It appears that 5 cents on a paper bag seems a small and detriment or disincentive to encourage the use of the bag. When the Senate took up this issue of 10 cents and then ended up on the floor amendment, except the 5 cents, was there any discussion about that? And
Yes. Basically, the discussion was whether the fee was high enough to incent a change in behavior, or whether the fee was too high for those that could not afford it. And so there was concern that 10 cents was too high for low-income individuals, and that it should be changed to reflect that, and that's the position that
And did they ever, if I may follow up, did they ever discuss if it were to be at that level, should they make it just optional versus
in committee, when reviewing the proposed amendment, there were members of that committee that didn't want to make the change, and said that without it being 10 cents, there potentially should not be a fee at all. But not to make the 5 cents discretionary.
I'm curious about the 2.25, and why not just ban all single-use point-of-sale plastic bags? How did they get to that number?
It's the threshold that's used in other states. Looking at California right now, statewide, 2.25.
Is there an easy example of that line in the sand?
I don't have it with me, but there's there's like a gauge document that shows like this is what this your typical bag is. This is your next size. And I can get you that to give you.
We might be incentivizing thicker bags.
You're incentivizing reusable bags,
Yeah.
yes. And the question becomes, and this is a question that's arisen in other jurisdictions, whether or not certain bags really are single use, but they exceed the 2.25 mils. I can't remember which town in Massachusetts it was that set it at like 5 mils. To disincent that kind of trying to manipulate the mil threshold. But at the same time, you're not going to be able to find a bag that's not a reusable bag that's more than 2.25. No, there aren't that many people that manufacture that type of bag. That's greater than 2.25, and that is not a reusable bag.
It's not a reusable, so they manufacture.
Go ahead, Representative McCullough.
Thank you. Dyslexia, Batman.
You'll hear from all the interested parties about whether or not that's the appropriate
Yeah,
threshold.
of course.
Representative Bates and then OD.
So, page 7, number 10. I am totally lost on what single-use disposable plastic food service ware is, and, yeah, that and printed materials. What, I thought, isn't this just for bags, straws, and polystyrene? Not,
The first section is, that's the regulations, the prohibitions. The second section is a working group, and they're gonna be looking at a broader universe of single-use products. And they're gonna recommend to the General Assembly potential policy or requirements. And so, there are jurisdictions that do regulate the single-use food service ware, forks, knives, bowls, etc. And then printed material is a significant component of the recycling stream. And so, and there's not, after National Sword in China, there's not a lot of options for management of it. And Cathy Jamieson's here, she can talk to you more about that. And so one of the purposes of this working group is to look at those types of products and recommend ways that they can be better managed to avoid their environmental and other issues.
thank you.
Representative Bodie.
So I'm looking at, page 4, line, it's under 6694. And food service establishment shall provide a single-use plastic straw to a person upon request. Well, did they say it had to be plastic? Why, then we're requiring for all eternity, until this law changes, plastic straws being made. So is it that some people have to have plastic for their disability, or?
The original language was if, to a person upon request, if they have a medical condition or disability. And in other jurisdictions, in the general conversation around that is, yes, some people do, because of their condition, or need a straw, and that a metal straw is not inappropriate, and they may not have a reusable straw with them. And so a plastic bendable straw is the best accommodation for certain persons. And that if you have the criteria being based on the fact that the person has a medical condition or disability, you basically put the onus on both the retailer and the food service establishment, I should say, to determine, do I have to make a judgment, does this person have a medical disability? Or you put the onus on the person requesting it to prove they have a medical disability. And that is not proper accommodation in either instance. And so that is the kind of the debate there. And then you have other considerations. In some jurisdictions, you can get a straw upon request, but only for the number of beverages that you purchased. And so you may have seen this in Tampa. They had something like this, and a guy came up and bought a beverage, and he got a straw, and he wanted another straw, and the person wouldn't give it to him, and so they got into a fist fight about it at the cash register, about whether or not he could have a second straw. And so there's different ways that jurisdictions have looked at that issue, but the best way to, according to the Senate, to accommodate the persons with conditions and to avoid putting the onus on either the food service establishment or the person with the request is to just say that it's provided upon request.
I get that, provided upon request, but why does it have to be plastic? Why can't it be a straw provided upon request?
You could do that. You might get some testimony that it has to be a straw that is appropriate to accommodate the person.
We can pursue that, Carol. It's a great question. Other questions? Thank you, Michael. All right, committee, we have more breaks if people could come back on time better. So we have 7 minutes. We have to be back by 10:30. Or you stay. Guilty as we start without you.
Not
We're
the way
starting
the
at
bill
ten
is
thirty.
set up right now.
It's like Brattleboro didn't have trouble.
Thanks for your support.
They can't just start charging people on the first day and then get people all riled up instead of having a nice rollout. Change that second one.
You have to change
Get the door.
Hey, thanks, kid.
the effective date.
You're all right.
Well, you know, I do what I can.
So you're gonna bring that
Bill walking in. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. For the record, I'm Cathy Jamieson. I'm the Solid Waste Program Manager at ENR. And thank you for allowing me to come and testify on Act 113. So I'd like to start off by saying the administration's position on this bill is neutral, but I'm here today to share with you some background information and factual information about plastic bags specifically, single-use plastics in general, and the recycling markets, and where that might be heading. So if I may start with single-use plastic bags, and you see that in S113 that targeting and would ban the use of the single-use plastic bags. And you might say, why? How did we get there? And that originally, many countries and then counties and cities within the United States targeted single-use plastic bags originally as a litter issue, and then marine litter issue specifically, or aquatic, where it was getting on beaches, it was unsightly, it was clogging storm drains, and they took action, originally for that. Plastics, though, and single-use plastics, and you'll hear testimony this week about single-use plastics, how we are becoming more knowledgeable about their potential ecosystem impacts. People are targeting single-use plastics because of a resource issue, the amount of plastic waste that's generated, and how we can try to conserve our resources and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by maybe making different choices with respect to single-use items. You'll hear a lot of discussion about the resources and what's called a life cycle analysis, and I'd like to share just a little bit of information about that, if I may. And so those analyses look at environmental impact of a product from the beginning of gathering up the inputs to manufacturing that product to the production of the product, the use of the product, and then the proper management when the consumer's done with the product. And so they call that the over the life of the product. And with respect to bags, single-use bags take up more resources compared to a durable bag when the durable bag is used repeatedly. So if you just used each bag once, like a single-use bag once, and a durable bag just once, then the single bag would win because it's thinner, a lot less material and whatnot. But with the use and reuse of durable bags, and they are produced and manufactured so that they are stronger and can be used repeatedly, then the durable bag wins. So you'll hear some trade-off there and good discussion about that. The one important thing, and if you only remember one thing from my testimony, is going to be this, okay? Listen, that these life cycle analyses only look at the impacts from proper management at the end of life of these materials. What you're going to hear and why many counties, cities, and countries have taken action is these single-use products are not being properly managed at their end of their life. So they are getting into the environment. They are causing problems with aquatic wildlife and potentially even getting into our food chain. All of those negative environmental impacts, when they're improperly managed, are not part of the traditional life cycle analysis. And so that's why we are seeing many government entities taking action on single-use products. So you'll also hear that it costs a lot environmentally to produce a paper bag. Why are we not, why are we treating paper bags separately than plastic bags? And it is true that it does take energy to produce a paper bag, but they're very different products, and they're made out of different materials. So plastic bags definitely contribute to this, but litter don't degrade easily. You know, the paper bag that's out in the environment within a few days is going to degrade, and eventually it could be something that could grow plants. With plastic, we're finding that it breaks down into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, but it's still plastic. It's not something that can be readily used for plants and animals. In fact, they're finding that these little small pieces of plastics are being consumed by aquatic life, and becoming part, ingested and not being able to be properly digested. So, plastic bags have been found to disrupt the natural environment and man-made drainage systems. They pose risk for wildlife. Everyone last year probably saw the picture of the turtle with the straw. So these plastic items are causing impacts. Even with our in Vermont, single-use plastic bags cause problem in our waste stream management. If it goes to the landfill, when the truckload trash goes in the landfill, it gets put into a large basically hole in the landfill. If there are plastic bags that are loose, they can go away. The landfills are required to have fencing all the way around the perimeter of the landfill, and they have staff that weekly or more frequently have to go around picking up any debris that is blown away from where they're trying to keep it contained. So it's a problem at the landfill when it gets disposed. If plastic bags should never go in your blue bin for recycling. If you want to recycle a plastic bag, please take it to a retail store that has a place or a container where you can put it. If it goes into the blue bin, it goes to the MRF, the Materials Recovery Facility. We have one in Williston, another one in Rutland. If it goes there, it gets tangled up into the equipment. The system has to be shut down, and all the plastic film that's in there has to be cut out by an individual. So CSWD informed us in 2017, it took them 780 staff hours that year to clean film off MRF equipment. So, and it's a dangerous job to get in there and cut that out. So it is causing issues in our recycling system, and our disposal system, and our environment. The one interesting thing is, even though we think we do use a lot of plastic bags, they are small, and they only take up a small part of our waste stream. So they take up about 1% or less of our waste stream. We know that from our waste composition study. EPA does information or shares information nationally about materials that are managed, and they report that only about 5% of plastic bags manufactured are being recycled. So we don't have great recovery for recycling these materials. They're either getting disposed in the landfill or getting out into the environment. So that's kind of background on why these bans are happening in other places. Where is it happening? There's at least 65 countries throughout the world that have adopted plastic bag bans. And there are more than 375 U.S. counties and municipalities that have enacted legislation. They either charge fees on the bags or ban on the bags. California was the first statewide program that was adopted, I think, about a year and a half ago. And more recently, just I think last month, New York passed a statewide legislation on banning plastic bags. California program, they require a 10-cent fee on paper bags that the retailer provides the customer if the customer doesn't bring a reusable bag. New York's a little bit different. My understanding is that it's up to the county to decide whether or not they pass an ordinance that would require a charge of 5 cents at the retail level. One of the things I am hearing from folks is that The reason why there's more support this year for a statewide program is they want a consistent program throughout the state. And so I think, you know, keeping it at the statewide level has some benefits, rather than kind of letting different counties or municipal entities do things differently. There's been attempts to try to do this voluntarily, and California was a really good example of that, where many or multiple attempts at either a city or a county level was made. We didn't see any significant progress, and that prompted about 130 cities and counties in California to adopt mandatory programs, and then that led to California adopting a statewide program. With programs that are out there, they have demonstrated to be very effective, not only reducing the number of single-use bags that people use, but also to have positive environmental impacts. With San Jose, California, they were having a significant problem with storm drains, and they measured after implementation of their program an 89% decrease in having to go and unplug or remove the plastics from the storm drains. And then Montgomery County, Maryland demonstrated or documented a significant reduction in their litter. I think it's 55% reduction in litter once their plastic bag ban went into effect. There are 3 different types of models that are typically used for these mandatory programs. One model is to just ban the bag. Some entities ban just single-use plastic bags. A few have banned both plastics and paper. Some municipal entities or counties or countries just charge a fee for the bags. They don't ban it, but the bag can be available on a fee. Some elect to do that only for the plastic bags. Some elect to do it for both the plastic and the paper. However, the most common model that's out there is what we call the hybrid model, and that's where they ban the plastic bag and charge a fee in the paper bag. The reason why that's done is it incentivizes, that fee will incentivize the consumer to bring their reusable bag. But having a bag available when the consumer either forgets their reusable bag, or perhaps they're a tourist and on vacation and they, kind of left that habit at home, it provides an easy, low-cost, effective solution that's a paper product that is easily recyclable, that doesn't have necessarily the negative environmental impacts that a plastic bag has. Studies have shown that when people have to pay, even just a little bit, it kind of incentivizes behavior. You might remember a few years ago, there were some grocery stores that if you brought your own bag, you get 2 cents off and they kind of phased that out. Studies have shown that when you get a little bit of money back, it doesn't necessarily prompt you, but if you charge that same amount of money, that you'll change your behavior. And don't ask me to explain why that is. So that's what's kind of out there. The range in fees that are typically charged for the paper bag, they range from 5 cents to 25 cents, but the 2 most common charges are the 5 cents and the 10 cents. When California had all of those 130 counties, municipalities adopting ordinances, it was by and large 10 cents was the most common charge that they had. If you took California out of the equation, and if you looked at all the other counties and cities in the U.S., I have to kind of look at the cheat sheet of this one. I think there's 25 in the United States that charge 5 cents, and there's 11 that charge 10 cents, and then there's 5 that have like different numbers, 17, 25, 2. But so you can see there that either 5 or 10 is the most commonly used. 10 was really common in California. 5 is a little bit more common in other places other than California. If you want us to do a little bit more research on that, we can. pull numbers up. We did have someone kind of looking at different programs and trying to track that.
Okay, we have are you finished?
I do have some information about recycling and a little bit on polystyrene.
Let's let her finish.
Yeah.
Okay, with respect to polystyrene, I don't have as much information to share, but that is not easily recycled. And just to know a little bit more about why can something be recycled is you have to be able to collect enough of it in a manner that's reusable in the marketplace and ship it to a place that is willing to use it. And with polystyrene, it is really, really hard because of the light. I mean, the strength of polystyrene is that it's light, but the disadvantage of it is hard to collect enough of it to then be able to efficiently ship it to somewhere where it can be used, and it has to be clean. And so, so you'll hear from people, perhaps this week that will, tell you that right now in Vermont, we don't have the ability to easily recycle polystyrene. And then a few minutes on the recycling markets, if I may. And so, what Michael Brady alluded to is that there has been a drastic change in the markets that started in the beginning of 2018. China changed their importation policy on recyclables. With recyclables, we have been accustomed to single stream recycling, and sometimes other materials gets in the recyclables, and oftentimes too with the processing, a little bit of like glass can get in the paper bale, a little bit of paper can get in the glass container, and so there is what we call contamination. And China had been receiving our recyclables, the U.S. recyclables, for a long time in manufacturing products and then shipping those products back to us. And they took a strict policy that they were going to, they wanted to try to develop their own recycling in China to aid their manufacturing. They also wanted to be able to take better, higher quality feedstocks for their manufacturing, so they raised the bar. And so that has flooded our U.S. market with our own recyclables, and when you flood the market, then the price drops. And so with respect to Vermont, that had the most impact on our paper, what we call our mixed paper recyclables, because that's what we were shipping to China. So the cost of managing mixed paper has gone up. And nationally, we recognize what we need to do, and this is not likely to change in China. So we need to change how we're looking at these materials, and this is happening in Europe too, can we have materials manufactured such that they're easier to recycle, that they provide better materials, feedstocks, or inputs for manufacturing. In fact, the European Union is ahead of us in this. They've adopted what's called the circular economy, where they are working directly with manufacturers so that once the consumer's done with it, really feed into manufacturing a new product. That makes, it reduces waste up front. It makes recyclables more valuable, and creates less expensive feedstocks for manufacturing. And so we need to invest in our recycling infrastructure, not only in Vermont, but nationally, but it's challenging right now because the value of our recycled commodities are at a low point. This is occurring at the same time packaging is changing, and so what we're trying to manage is changing. And it's becoming more and more harder to recycle materials being used in the marketplace. And so the two of those challenges are prompting other states to really look at how should we change the system. And there are at least 3 states right now, Washington, Connecticut, and Indiana, who are looking toward using a model of extended producer responsibility. And we use that model for managing several of our waste types, material types in Vermont, including electronics, paint, batteries, mercury-added products. And those have been demonstrated to be very successful programs in Vermont once we have implemented. And so that's going on, and that's why you are seeing in the second section of S113 the study group looking at that broader group of single stream plastics, and then should we explore whether or not Vermont should pursue extended producer responsibility. So,
Okay, we have time for a couple of questions. Representative McCullough.
Two questions. Cathy, what states or jurisdictions are you aware of that give a pass on the purchase at the point of sale for a single-use paper bag when the customer has a snap or whip?
I think that is, okay, California and New York are the only states that have statewide programs, and it's in the California law. In the New York law, I haven't read all the way through
Okay.
yet, and I don't know if it's in the New York law.
Okay, second question, you said 5% of the single-use plastic bags are recycled based on your actual counts going through, and we understand that's an estimate. I'm wondering how pervasive in that 5% dry cleaner bags are.
So the 5% number I get from EPA, so I don't know the
Okay.
answer to that. I will say that it is common for dry cleaning bags to be exempt from other jurisdictions that have put bans on plastic bags, as well as produce bags, and if you're in a hardware store, you get the little bits of nuts and bolts and you put them in a bag.
Yeah.
So it's common for those types of bags to be exempt.
That absolutely understood, but when maybe that's a better question for CSWD, because they're the ones that actually are applying
Right,
through
they
there.
see what's coming through.
Yeah, okay, I will ask.
Okay, Representative Fave.
Could you give us a little more on what how the hybrid system works? Where, you know, I like the idea of banning plastic bags just upright, and then going with, if you needed a bag, having a paper bag available. But I'm just wondering, is that the way they work the hybrid or not?
The hybrid, yes, that the paper is the bag that's available, that the plastic is banned, not vice versa. And then there's a charge, a fee on that paper bag, and that's to incentivize the consumer to bring in the reusable bag. Chicago has a 7-cent fee on bags, and my son lives there, and I visited him, and we needed to go to the store, and he keeps bags right on his fridge, and including a couple of really big paper bags that he reuses, because he said, Mom, it's 7 cents. And so, that fee incentivizes him, because he paid 7 cents for that paper bag, so he's gonna reuse it.
Thank you.
Cathy, thank you so much. That was incredibly helpful.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Paul Burns.
Morning. For the record, my name is Paul Burns. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Public Interest Research Group, BPIRG. Thank you. And BPIRG, as you may know, is the largest consumer and environmental advocacy organization in Vermont with about 50,000 members across the state. And we have long worked. We were created in 1972 and working on solid waste issues and recycling has been in our domain since the earliest days when we were supporting the bottle bill, which was also launched in 1972 here in Vermont. And so we have a long history on these issues, and I therefore really appreciate the opportunity to be before you today. I have submitted testimony, as you see here, and some printed copies for some folks as well. There are more than a dozen citations in here, so there's lots more reading if you all are interested as we go through the testimony here, or I'm not going to just read every line here, but we'll be referencing some of these other things as well. But simply put, we organizationally are very supportive of this legislation that you're considering. It takes on what some people call the trifecta of single-use plastics, that being the single-use plastic bags, straws, and polystyrene. And so it's an excellent start at addressing this problem of plastics. I'll note that I also made available to you all as members of the committee this National Geographic magazine edition from June of last year. And I note it now because they've got the plastic bag featured here in the look of an iceberg, because when we talk about dealing with plastic bags and straws and polystyrene, it really is the tip of the iceberg when we're talking about plastics overall. So lots of excellent information, some of which I will refer to specifically in that edition. This is an issue that it happens to be something that I've worked on personally for a long time as well. It happens that 29 years ago, this past February, I was standing in front of a Wegmans grocery store in Syracuse, New York, protesting their plastic bag policy, and Wegmans kicked me off their property, along with others who were protesting this. So this is a nice photo of me, Representative. I know you'll appreciate that.
Handsome guy.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So 29 years we've been working on this policy, and on Monday of this week, Wegmans announced the plan to eliminate plastic bags by the end of this year. Only takes 3 decades sometimes to win these policies. Wegmans announced this policy in New York State, and as you just heard from Cathy Jamieson, New York State did pass legislation just quite a month ago to eliminate plastic bags by March of next year. So Wegmans is getting a little bit of a jump on that by eliminating them first in their New York stores before that. But I was happy to see that as kind of my own personal involvement. I'm sure that had something to do with it. We are hearing an awful lot about the problems of plastic, whether it's this National Geographic or 60 Minutes did an episode on it 6 or 8 weeks ago, and it's just in the news an awful lot about the problems of the plastics that we're seeing. And I note that even Wegmans in their statement, which you see there, they talk about not only are they reusable bags the best option for the environment, but they also hold more groceries without breaking or tearing, requiring fewer bags per shopping trip than paper or plastic bags. That marks real progress when it comes to Wegmans. And just below that, you see a description from the National Geographic magazine of the scope of the problem more broadly. According to National Geographic, the world has created about 9.2 billion tons of plastic since around 1950, just after World War II. 9.2 billion tons. Most of that plastic, 6.9 billion tons, has become waste. And of that, 6.3 billion tons never made it to the recycling bin. What that means is it either ended up in a landfill or an incinerator or out in the environment somewhere. Again, as Cathy Jamieson was talking about, a lot of this material doesn't end up being properly dealt with at the end of its useful life. When we're talking about single-use plastics, as is the subject of this bill before you, we're talking about items that usually have a useful life of about 15 minutes or sometimes less. And then they last in our environment for 500 years or more. And that's why it really makes sense, it seems to me, for you to be focusing on this problem as you are. These kinds of plastics are choking our oceans and spoiling our environment, killing wildlife. And if that weren't enough, we must also recognize that these plastics are threatening our health as well. You have heard that plastics don't break down in the environment. They don't exist in nature. Microplastics then are found all over the world. And just as some examples, I pulled some recent headlines about where these tiny, tiny bits of plastic are now being found. You may have seen some of these yourself, but there's a story from The Guardian about sea salt around the world is contaminated by plastic, studies show. So if you've got some sea salt at home, you're also pouring little bits of plastic on your food. Plastic fiber is found in tap water around the world. So you say, well, okay, maybe I'll use bottled water. The World Health Organization launched a health review after microplastics were found in 90% of bottled water supplies. So it's not just in tap water and bottled water as well, which of course we know a lot of bottled water, comes from a tap someplace. Milwaukee Journal Sentinel found that studies find tiny bits of plastic in beer samples, including that in Milwaukee. I don't know that Vermont beer has been tested specifically, but don't think you're safe there. And finally, from National Public Radio, beer, drinking water, and fish, tiny plastic is everywhere. So it's in our food, it's in our water. We cannot avoid being exposed to these microplastics. So I wanted to show you a couple of graphs, and these were some of the sources of some of the information that you will also see very similar on, I think it's page 55 of the National Geographic magazine, but you'll see much of the same data contained here. The top graph is looking at global primary plastics production. This is production of plastics from about the beginning, 1950 or so, to 2015. And it is broken down by industry sector. And you're seeing a pretty sharp incline in the quantity of plastics being produced from beginning in 1950. There we had about 2 million metric tons of plastic resin being created in 1950. Then you see a pretty regular incline there. You see in 1973 there was a dip from the oil crisis, and then in 2008 the Great Recession, another significant dip. But other than that, from an environmental perspective, it's a remarkable and concerning upward trend in just the overall quantity of plastics being produced. This next graph shows the quantity of plastics waste generation. And the kind of interesting thing here is it largely mirrors the top graph of plastics production, but there's an even greater quantity of waste when you look at the type of material, of use, and that is in packaging. Packaging accounts for just about half of all of the plastics waste that we're seeing being generated today. And when you hear, I believe it was Senator Bray talking about the fact that in the last 15 years or so, that's half of all plastics ever made was made in the last 15 years. That means you just look at the line from, in this graph, 2000 to 2015, and you see that how large a chunk of the overall plastic production that is. That's how it outweighs all the rest of the years combined. All right, so I probably don't need to spend a lot more time on the problem. There's more information in testimony, and you have lots more access to that. So let me get to why we think S113 is a good idea, a good solution to get at some of these most common types of throwaway plastic. First, the bags, the issue of bags. And you have heard about what the policy is. We support the policy. But I do urge the committee to consider returning to a 10-cent charge on paper bags, and there are a couple of reasons for this. The first is that a 10-cent charge on paper bags is just a more effective incentive to encourage shoppers to bring their own reusable bags to the store. Wegmans noted that that's a transition that needs to happen, and there are lots of other places with a very good experience that we can look to. In California, for instance, though their statewide law hasn't been in effect all that long, at the city and county level, there has been a lot of policies in place for enough time to be evaluated. Consider, for instance, in Alameda County. In Alameda County, this second to the last paragraph, you see in 2013, the county passed an ordinance similar to the provisions that we have in 113 with respect to bags. According to the analysis from the agency that oversees solid waste management in Alameda County, the 69 chain stores there went from using 50 million bags each year down to 10 million total between paper and plastic. That would be a heavier duty plastic and paper that people would be paying 10 cents for there. That's a tremendous reduction. The number of bags overall went from 13 to 8 million in terms of paper bags, and then plastic 37 million down to 2 million. And so what's interesting there is I think it demonstrates how well it can work to put a 10-cent charge on paper bags, because you might have expected that there would be a much more common just transition over to using paper bags, which are still available to everyone, but at that 10-cent charge. So people decided not to pay the 10 cents or larger, there are fewer people using paper bags in this county now than there were before the law to begin with, even though the single-use plastic bags are not available to them. So what is happening is that people are bringing reusable bags at a much higher rate, and when they buy 1 or 2 items, the study finds they leave the store without any bag at all if they didn't bring their own. And so that is working really well. And the senior program manager there identified the 10-cent charge as being key. Her quote is, 10-cent charge really affects how consumers behave at the point of sale. Just quickly to note some of the other information from other California communities. There were 151 cities and counties that adopted a single-use bag ban ordinance before the statewide law went into effect in California. According to the group Californians Against Waste, there are lots of information. If you care to look for more, I've got the citation here, but three points really rose to the top. They eliminated over 5 billion plastic shopping bags. These are all the counties and cities taken together there in California. 5 billion plastic shopping bags per year, and all the resulting litter and waste equaling 66 million pounds of plastic. Reduced paper bag consumption by nearly 400 million bags annually. And then there is a climate benefit as well, as they reduced by approximately 185,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions per year. That's a lot of benefit when you think about these policies just dealing one bag at a time there. So it's a fair question with these exemptions and so forth, and it was raised the other day, does it still work? California much bigger than Vermont, but you can still bring it down to scale, and we're going to see a significant environmental benefit by adopting this policy. By increasing the charge to 10 cents, it would also allow the state to use a portion of that money to get more reusable bags into the hands of the people who really need them. In the Senate, as you've heard, there was concern about the 10-cent charge on paper bags and the hardship that may pose to some Vermonters. But it seems to me the best answer to that concern is not to lower the charge on single-use paper bags to a nickel. Instead, we should make reusable bags, which are far more durable and versatile, more easily accessible to everyone. And so you could use a portion of that extra 5 cents that if you were to add it back in to perhaps have a grant program at the Department of Environmental Conservation where they could work with nonprofits, with food banks, with community action agencies or others who have regular contact with folks, maybe lower income Vermonters who if they don't have access to reusable bags now, we could get them into their hands. Everything that leaves the food bank could go in a reusable bag, for instance. And after a couple of years, I think we will have saturated the market enough here so that few people could say they don't have ready access to one or perhaps multiple reusable bags. But they are available now. I brought some. Everybody's got these things. I've got dozens now, but they last a long time. This is one that VPIRG put out in 2002. Still works really well. And there are lots of other examples, but I wanted to bring one from California. When I was out in California a couple of years ago in a place that already had the policy in place, you see how small that they can scrunch down and that you can have these nylon bags. And this is a grocery store that was very proud of it, where they talked about the Grove Market. They were voted the best neighborhood market there, and they had a nice little recycling symbol and talked about how great this is, and it's greenbagamerica.com. So it becomes a marketing tool for some of them as well. So, yes?
I just want to be sure, we have 3 other witnesses before lunch, so I want to make sure you get to your high points that you want us to go in.
Absolutely. So let me move, thank you. So I would say consider that move to increasing the charge on the paper bags, which is our probably #1 recommendation for you to consider in terms of a change here, and how, if you want to talk more about how we could make that work to get more reusable bags out there, I'd be happy to do that. Really, the second change that we would suggest from the Senate proposal has to do with the area of the straws, and that is exactly what Representative Odie was raising earlier. There is a section of that bill in section 6694, which is page 4 of the legislation, that talks about how establishments shall make a single-use plastic straw available upon request. And it seems to me that you may want to, instead of using the word shall, use the word may. And the point there is that establishments must not be prevented from making straws available to people who request them. And that would be a legitimate concern. But since the establishments are not required to make a straw available today, it would be an unusual thing if, with the passage of this bill, for the first time, establishments would be required to make a plastic single-use straw available to anybody who asks for it. So you could say they may make a plastic straw available, or perhaps even better, you could say they will make a straw available upon request. And there are lots of examples of straws that are out there now. And I'm just thinking about establishments that make the transition, as many already have, to paper straws or something else. It would seem unusual, again, if they had to stock plastic straws for anybody who asked at that time. There are no changes that we propose with respect to the polystyrene provisions here. It's a ban that makes a lot of sense. I will point out that as part of testimony, we have offered a decision out of the state of New York City, that had to do with a proposal there dealing with a restriction on polystyrene. And it goes through very methodically why it is that it is an appropriate policy to eliminate polystyrene for these kind of food service containers. And that is in the testimony that I'm offering you here. I won't go through it. The two major points are: it is more toxic than any other kind of plastic. It is not effectively recyclable at all. And if you leave it in the system, it can make other items in the recycling stream, at the material recovery facility, contaminated, because it is so light and it crushes and separates so easily that if you're doing paper recycling in the same facility, a lot of it gets contaminated with this polystyrene, and it really makes a great deal of sense to take it out of the system entirely up front, as much of it as you can. We support the idea of the working group, and I think it's a terrific idea as we look at next steps. Extended producer responsibility is part of that. You're seeing a lot of makers of packaging and even beverage makers now talking about a higher degree of recycled content in their beverage containers. Coca-Cola announced in Australia that by the end of this year, 70% of their plastic beverage containers will be made of 100% recycled content plastic. But in the US, their plan is only to get to 50% recycled content by the year 2030. It seems to me we could do, it's not a technological problem then, it is a problem of a lack of commitment to do it here, so it may take states like ours and others to give them a push in the right direction.
70% where?
In Australia.
And 50% here.
Well, 70% of, a couple of numbers here, 70% of their bottles will be made of 100% recycled content. So they're saying they can do 100%, they just won't get to all of them. Here, it would only be 50% recycled content by the year 2030. So, there's so much more that can be done there, but this is a terrific first step. The elements contained in 113, I think the working group is just makes an awful lot of sense as we think about next steps for doing that. And if you're going to have more recycled content, you've got to look for clean, quality material, particularly PET plastic. And for that, we would encourage you to be considering an update to the bottle bill as well. And that is some of the recommendations that you find in my testimony as well from plastics experts out there. You're never going to get to that level of recycled content without clean, recycled plastic material.
So the number 3 on your list of requests: return to 10-cent paper bag, straws, the language you proposed, and then your last thing is update the bottle bill.
Yes, but not as part of this. I would love it if you felt so inclined, Madam Chair, but I've got another place I have an idea for that for you. But it's kind of an example of, I think, what this committee could be looking at as well. I really appreciate the opportunity to testify.
Sure, and I want to make sure if there's any questions that we have a chance. Does anyone have questions? Representative McCullough,
For California, let's just say California, do they exempt WIC and PETA?
No.
They do not.
No.
Okay.
In the New York, if I may, the New York law, in terms of the 5-cent charge for paper bags, it's not a statewide charge. That legislation, I don't think anybody would talk about it as a good model, but they allow cities and counties to put a charge on paper bags of 5 cents, and then they split the 5 cents, a couple of cents going to the kind of programs that I'm talking about for getting reusable bags into the marketplace, and then several cents going to a state environment fund.
Representative Dolan and Odie.
But just a quick question, good morning. What's your opinion if we're also struggling about trying to find sources of funding for clean water? And we moved this to 10 cents and retained 5 cents of it for clean water funding. Do you have a reaction?
Well, there's a nexus between single-use plastics and single-use products generally, and water, and water protection. So I think it makes sense, and even if you were to initially use some of this money to get more reusable bags out there, you could, after a year or two, transition over so that all of that went to clean water. Would be a perfectly sensible place for that, or you could, it's up to you and your colleagues to make that decision, but I think there is a nexus between clean water and this idea of single-use items. It is also true that the bottle bill now has the unclaimed deposits going to clean water, and so any expansion there would expand the amount of money going to clean water.
Representative Odie.
That was exactly my question.
Great. Thank you all.
Thanks very much.
Great line.
Yeah.
All right, John King.
I'm going to secure the garbage can for my presentation.
I'll start out with the note that there are 3 of you get done before.
Yeah, I'm going to do an expedited process and try to make it as easy as possible. Okay. My name is John King. I work for Foley Distributing, Vermont's the last remaining Vermont-based non-foods distributor. We sell over $1.25 million worth of retail paper bags, retail plastic bags, paper hard cups, expanded foam cups and products, and compostable packaging products. So we provide a neutral position that's neutral and transparent. We do not support Bill S-113. We believe the most sustainable thing to do is have a no bag ban, which means no paper bags, no plastic bags. The gentleman before me kindly noted Wegmans, and I always look at good things for companies when they start using things. But if you look at future grocery business, artificial intelligence is going to be a key. In 5 years, there won't be any cashiers, and you're going to be able to put your food into a carriage, and you're going to walk your food right out to the car. That's within 5 years, if not sooner. Walmart, by the end of this year, will have robotic scrubbers cleaning all their floors in all their stores. There's robotic scrubbers to do the scanning of all the retail shelving. Okay, so that's coming down. There's a book that I recommend you read, AI Superpowers, and it'll tell you what's going to happen in a lot of different segments. I'm going to break this down to 2 categories: plastic bags. This is the high D bag, the most cost effective. It costs about a penny or 2 pennies. That goes in the trash right now, side of the roads, lakes, and things like that. This is a low density bag, primarily used like at City Market, and it's about 0.8 mil thick. It is reusable, heavy in the handle, and this goes in the trash. Okay. This is a reusable bag, and a lot of the laws that have been passed, like in Massachusetts, and I think this bill recommends is a waiver for 2.25 mil. Okay, so this is an option for some of those customers that have a lot of walking customers that are using it. Okay, so on this one here, this is about 7 cents. So 1 to 2 cents to 7 cents. This is about 12 to 13 cents, 2.2 mil. And on this bag it says can be used 125 times. I don't know who said that. I don't know what tests were done, but I know what this bag looks like after a couple of times, and it says it can be washed. I recommend all of you go get one and try to wash it and see how it goes. So that is what I'm concerned about is if you look at the plastic industry, they're predicting the more use of plastics, because people that do use bags and get a waiver 2.25 mil is going to be more weight. When you're a plastic manufacturer, you don't look at bags, you look at weight. That's dollars. I was at Mike's Donuts, Mike's Pastry in the north end of Boston that enacted this law, and I bought 5 cannolis, and I got a 2.5 clear bag, and for 5 cannolis. That's an example of what's going on. You can't make this stuff up. So this is so again. If you look at what is the most common car that's going to be made, it's going to be trucks, pickup trucks. Everybody's driving a pickup truck. You look at GM and Ford in the last 3 months, they're going to be producing pickup trucks. What goes in the back of a pickup truck? Bags. Bags. Okay, that goes on that. Lake Champlain, we're going to be going fishing for a day. You're going to have this heavy dude. Where does a plastic bag go? It's going to go in the water. So I think generally people are good. I think they're not intentionally throwing these things away. But that's, when you enact this law at 2.25, you're going to be selling more plastics, and they're going to be still going in the same spot. Here's another example of 2.25. This is heavy duty, okay? Paper bags. Okay, we've been doing Hunger Mountain for many, many years. We ask a lot of a paper bag. I recommend you all go to Trader Joe's and see what Trader Joe does. So they're California based. They're double bagging a handle bag. So I don't know, those stats, when you double bag every time, that's a lot of bags. Sustainability, when you measure how much it costs environmentally to make a paper bag, it's not a really clean process. It takes a lot of energy. A paper bag machine is 75 feet long, 23 feet wide. It weighs about 25 tons. It's huge. It takes a lot of energy. Not one paper bag manufacturer is certified. I sell toilet paper and towels to the state of Vermont. All our products are certified, which means they're Green Seal certified or Eco certified. They have to get audited in these plants to make sure they have the best standards. Find me one paper bag company that has been certified. You're not going to find that. And then most importantly, someone had talked about life cycle and the disruption of recycling. We just can't make this up. We've been sending all our stuff to China for all these years, and it makes absolutely 0 sense. And all of a sudden, for security reasons, China says, we're not taking your stuff anymore. So all of a sudden, we're getting flooded with all this material. And if you look at recycling, and we've developed a closed loop recycling called P3 closed loop, and you can certainly look at it. We have it at Champlain. We basically take shredded paper and we bring it to a mill very close by, and we sell the product back. That is recycling, okay? So you look at this paper bag, it's really a single-use bag. It's not going to be used twice. You can't even use it once. It's so hard. So because a lot of times there's moisture in it. There's no moisture that rips. So a lot of people are not using that twice. This goes in the recycling bin because it says it's recycled. But if you look at what's happening in the state of Vermont, we have a waiver right now to July 2019 that all the mixed paper coming as a single stream can go into the landfill. Okay. And the question that should be asked is, where is the mill going to be to take this? You know, before the newspaper print mills closed in Canada, that's where we used to send our stuff. Then we sent it to China. The question is, where is this going to go? Is it clean enough? I deal with manufacturers, the few that are remaining in the New England area, and they can't take a lot of this stuff. So this basically goes in the trash. Okay, so that takes care of the paper side. And currently, Costco, BJ, and Sam's do not provide any bags. I recommend you go and visit that so you can see that yourself. That's going to be the future of all these other retailers, except for small mom and pop stores. That's an issue that needs to be addressed. And this bag is a reusable bag, I think. It's polypropylene. It's made in Vietnam. It's got canvas handles. 50 cents. I got this at Hannaford's, and he charged me 50 cents. And the general manager was at the cashier. And now it's $1 million store a week. And general manager is at the cashier, and I asked him what's going on. He goes, I can't get any help. And he says, listen, I'm going to give you 2 bags. He said, in 5 years, there's not going to be any cashiers. You're going to be putting the stuff in the cart and go right to your car. That's where it's going. That's from the general manager telling me what's going to happen. So this is a reusable bag. It can be cleaned very easily. It's more storable and more durable. Or like the bag that the other gentleman had shown you. So we're just talking about, if you measure it, you can manage it. If we develop this law and nothing's really ever happening and we're doing more plastics and we don't have the data, we're just saying things to say it's really good. And I think that's something that should be considered. Do the due diligence and to do that end. Expanded polystyrene products. Again, we sell compostable packaging. So I'm going to give this this is compostable packaging. Most of this product is made in Asia. And when it's compostable, it's going to be certified by BPI, and it's going to be made with corn-based PLA product to allow it to break down in certain conditions. Currently, there's only one place in New England and New York that can technically take all commercial packaging for composting. And it's a great star for Vermont. It's Green Mountain Compost. They can take this and they can compost it. Everywhere else, Boston, there's not a place to take it because it's massive volume. New York City, I don't know where they're going to ship it because when you make a composting facility, it's a tough place to be living next to, especially the high rent district. So that hasn't been resolved. So basically, most of the, I would say 97% of all composting packaging is not getting composted. So composting is going in the trash.
What's BPI?
It's a certification like Green Seal certification for the paper side and cleaning chemicals. They go in and they've got to audit the process to ensure that they're meeting, that it breaks down in a commercial grade composting facility. Green Mountain Compost has done a great job there in meeting those standards and stuff like that. So cups, which is a big issue, more so than the straws. The straw gets a lot of attention. So we talked about composting. This is the polystyrene foam. And very light. It's great heat, keeps the heat of the product really hot. You look at coffee, you look at any store in Vermont, the #1 most profitable category in every store is coffee. So it's important for the sustainability. And when you're selling coffee, heat is really important, especially larger sizes. So what's great about this product, it's a good price point, it's a great heat insulator, and it can be recycled with the right systems in place. It doesn't go well with single stream, it just doesn't go well with machines. We're experiencing a lot of issues price-wise when people move from this category, all right, to these categories I'll be talking about. You just don't go overnight and open up a new machine. If you look at Dunkin' Donuts, they're going to be moving to double wrapped paper by 2020. This company is going to be doing it. So there's a lot of stress. I'm having a hard time getting product because they're gearing up to these national accounts to be moving over. So we don't recommend at this point. It goes in the trash, and that's where it goes right now, basically. So when you ban this, and your Dunkin' Donuts or your McDonald's, they know the number. When they sell larger cups, it's about the heat and keeping the quality really warm. So the solution is, and you can't make this up, a double paper wall cup. So if you look at the sustainability, it takes a lot more energy and effort to make this paper cup. So it's not only one paper cup, it's 2. It takes 3 times longer to make, right? And inside every paper cup, there's a petroleum-based lining in there that's impregnated into the paper, which means it is not recyclable, ever. There's some people saying they can. It's just cost-effectively unfeasible. So what has to happen, this can't go in your single stream. This goes in the trash. All the paper goes in the trash, just where the foam is. Now, when you're going into landfills, if you look at Vermont, we only have one landfill. A lot of this paper is 3 to 4 times the weight of foam. Again, same, paper, single wall. The problem here, it's good for smaller sizes. Again, polyline, it's no different, really, just a different format than the foam, okay? And that goes in the trash. Okay. Is it,
You're running out of time.
is that, all right?
You're talking trash.
Yeah.
What? No, it's just going in there. So basically, I'm proposing it should be no bag ban. I mean, no bags, and other than a reusable bag. That is the right answer. In 5 years, it will be here.
Okay. Polystyrene take-home message.
What's that?
What's your polystyrene take-home message?
Well, it's no different than the paper stuff. It's all going in the trash. The trash weighs more. It creates more gases and things like that because of the weight.
So you're opposed to the polystyrene?
I'm opposed
ban.
because if you look at the micro roasters, I sell all the micro roasters as are printed cups. Okay, it's important to, when you sell coffee, you need to have a printed cup to promote that brand. We started with Green Mountain Coffee when they had the little coffee roasters. It's so difficult to do a printed cup right now because of the pressure, because when people leave polystyrene to a paper cup, these little micro roasters, I can't print their name on it. I've been to places where they're putting stamps on it. So it's becoming cost prohibitive because of the pressure going over. And it's not recyclable. A paper cup, is not recyclable. So it goes in the same place as the foam. In terms of making it carbon product, it takes the same, it actually can take, when you do a double paper wall from a foam, you're doubling the input there.
All right, are there questions for Mr. King? Representative Karen.
I'm from Rutland. How many employees does Foley have?
We have 35 employees, celebrating 141 years this year. We're Vermont's oldest family-owned business.
Now, so this Senate 113, is that going to hurt your company? Or?
It's hurting us now. It's hurting us now. I can't, I showed you the Hunger Mountain bags. There's so much pressure on these qualities of the bags because when California eliminates plastic bags, everybody goes to paper. Well, you just can't turn these machines on, and then, when they're a monopoly, and there's only one really viable paper bag manufacturer, when when they have quality issues, they're like, no, we can't help you out, because they're having them everywhere. So we're eating money in one of our customers, so it is affecting our business.
Yeah.
It's affecting my business because I can't do printed cups for thriving new micro roasters. Micro roasters is no different to the microbreweries. It's really thriving. But, when you, so it is affecting our business now. And I'm just saying, I'm just posing questions. If in 5 years, you look at this technology, Wegmans is doing the right thing, but they know a lot more than what we know in this room. And they see that cashier segment going away, and there's not going to be any bags. You look at Costco, you look at BJ's, you look at Sam's, they don't have bags right now. And that's where they're all going to go. And so my question, you enact this law, and in 5 years it's gone, and really you're not really doing anything. That's my only question. I'm just posing a question. Where's our recycling going? The paper bag is, where is it going to go? And it should be in one sentence. Our paper, all our mixed paper goes to this mill. One sentence. That's all we ask. Where's it going?
All right, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you. Great, thank you.
Judith, hey, next up. Are you Louis?
I'm Louis, yeah.
Louis.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to appear before you this morning. Thanks. Great. I'm Judith Enck. I'm a visiting professor at Bennington College, and I teach classes on plastic pollution. And before coming to Bennington, I served as EPA Regional Administrator during the Obama administration for EPA Region 2, which sadly did not include Vermont. And I'm here with one of my students, Celt, who's going to join me in reviewing some of this information. So I think, know, you've run through some of the important issues, but the one statistic that really sticks with me is that if we don't really change the way we do single-use plastic packaging in the world, by 2025, for every 3 pounds of fish in the ocean, there will be 1 pound of plastic. And 8.8 million tons of plastic enter our ocean every year. And it's not coming from boats, it's 80% is land sourced. So it's litter coming off of the street, it's litter that gets at beaches. And if you look at something like a plastic bottle, not to pick on you, Representative, but if you take a plastic bottle and if it gets into the ocean currents in the sunlight will serve almost like a paper shredder. And this bottle will become hundreds of pieces of plastic that then becomes available in the marine environment. The United Nations tells us that over 663 species have been impacted by plastic pollution. That's a photo of an albatross, if you look real closely. These birds are eating plastic and their guts are being filled with plastic. The seabirds often think that the colorful bottle caps on plastic bottles are shrimp. They bring it back to the nest, they feed the chicks will often choke on the plastic, and if they don't choke, seabirds and lots of other marine life is just eating a lot of plastic, and then they feel that they're full and they're not getting calories from regular food, and they are very much damaged. It seems like almost every week there's a media report about a whale, for instance, was just found with 88 pounds of plastic in its stomach. And those are regular reports. I think one misconception with plastic is the gyrus or the islands of plastic in the ocean. In fact, most of the plastic falls to the bottom. Only about 5% is on the surface, and it breaks into small pieces. This is not just an ocean issue, although, you know, you may be asking, why does this matter in Vermont? Well, all rivers lead to the ocean, but also our lakes are loaded with microplastics. In Lake Champlain, there was a recent study that the plastics are passing through sewage treatment plants, which, by the way, the microplastic may appear in the sludge from the sewage treatment plants. The SUNY Plattsburgh study found 10,000 to 15,000 microplastics being discharged every day from sewage treatment plants in the Lake Champlain basin. And these microplastics are being ingested by fish and wildlife. They're also a chemical exposure issue because some toxins such as PCBs and heavy metals are almost like hitchhikers. They attach to the microplastics and then they can be consumed. Similar information throughout the Great Lakes. Plastics are made from chemicals and fossil fuels. So your work to reduce single-use plastic packaging in Vermont is a climate change strategy. For many years, plastics were made from oil, but most recently they're made from ethane, which is a byproduct of fracking. So if you look at this diagram of fracking, which is not to scale, but if you look at the flare, that's ethane. And what companies are doing are trying to capture the ethane, send it by pipeline to new facilities called ethylene cracker plants. And at these ethylene cracker plants, where the ethane is heated at high temperature, it becomes a major ingredient for single-use plastic packaging. So the cost of single-use plastic packaging will come way down, but it's not good news for people living near ethylene cracker plants. There are over 250 proposed in the United States, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, the Gulf states, and some folks are saying this is the new coal, and again, we'll be relying on fracking to drive more production of single-use plastic packaging. It's very much an environmental justice issue. These ethylene cracker facilities are proposed almost always in low-income communities and communities of color. Plastic packaging has lots of toxic additives, so it's not just a solid waste issue, it's not just a water quality issue, it's a toxics issue. And when you think about your own life for a moment, if you're like me, you get a very mediocre sandwich for lunch, and it's overpriced, and you eat it in 10 minutes. And what's left behind? The plastic bag it came in, perhaps a polystyrene container, a plastic straw, plastic condiment containers, plastic water bottle. All of that plastic stays with us for centuries for a very mediocre 15-minute lunch. Plastic is also a health concern. I know your body has done a lot of work on PFOA. I've done a lot of work on PFOA in Hoosick Falls when I was at EPA. Vermont, by the way, is doing a much better job on PFOA than other states. But you may be surprised to know that PFOA is used as a lining in food packaging because it's grease resistant. So that's why I never eat microwavable popcorn. And as Paul Burns mentioned, microplastics are in our drinking water, in freshwater sources, but also twice as much in bottled water. Now, when I teach my class on plastic pollution at Bennington College, I notice a lot of the students, like Louie, who you'll hear from in a moment, are thinking, well, we can recycle our way out of this problem. And then when I tell them, no, we can't, they look very sad. And I'm very sad, because I'm a big booster of recycling. I love it. But worldwide, we've only recycled 9% plastics, and that number will be going down. So the bill you are considering, I call the plastic trifecta, and it's terrific. And you will be one of the first states in the country to tackle all three of this material in one bill. California has addressed all of this, but in multiple bills, and never all at once. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Louis Celt, who will talk to you a little bit about bags.
Thank you, Judith. I won't take up too much time, but I just want to briefly talk about the section of this bill that focuses on the single-use plastic bags, the banning of those, and the fee on paper. So I think it's different to consider the multiple factors that this affects in the environment. So not just the plastics that end up in the marine ecosystems, affecting marine wildlife and ending up in all of our water and that effect. But in 2014, approximately 100 billion single-use plastic shopping bags were used just in the US, and 12 million barrels of oil were used to make that many shopping bags. So the two types of plastics that are used to make plastic bags, the high density and the low density polyethylene, in container form, when these are thick plastics, these are some of the most recyclable plastics that are out there. But the film versions that are used to produce single-use plastic bags cannot be recycled easily at all. And so these oftentimes will end up being recycled in curbside recycling bins, and they end up going to a materials recovery facility, or commonly referred to as MRFs, MRFs. And when these end up in MRFs, plastic bags very commonly jam up the MRFs and cause the equipment to shut down for hours or even days, costing these facilities time and money. The proper recycling of these thin film plastic bags is very difficult. It requires a completely separate and distinct recovery program, and the public education for how this program works has not been adequate. So there's really no easy way to recycle out of this problem, like Judith mentioned. Only 5.5% of plastic bags have been recycled. So this is not a problem that we can recycle out of. Reduction is the key goal here. So the fee on paper that is proposed in section 6693 of Senate Bill 113 is really essential to encourage the use of reusable bags and not just a shift to paper bags, as we heard other people mention. In Brattleboro, Vermont, where they passed just a straight ban on plastic bags without a fee on paper, One of the major retail stores there said that 85% of customers just switched from plastic to paper, and that is not what we want to encourage. We want to encourage a shift to reusables. Just shifting to paper creates a hardship on business owners, on small business owners especially, because paper bags are more expensive to purchase than the plastic bags. So having a fee on paper is really beneficial for the store owners. And in section, subsection B of section 6693 of Senate Bill 113, it mentions, it clarifies that this money stays with the store owners. And we highly support that and encourage that. So 345 local governments around the country have put a ban or a fee on plastic, with California passing statewide and New York more recently. I myself am part of a local group in Bennington, Vermont, a local chapter of 350.org, which is an environmental group there. For the last year, we've been working on trying to get a local bag ban and a fee on paper in Vermont. Right now, we're putting that operation on hold to support Senate Bill 113 and to really put all our efforts into getting this bill passed. We think having this standard across the state would make it easier for everyone involved and really addressing not just bags, but the plastic trifecta that Judith mentioned. For these reasons and more, I think it's very reasonable for Vermont to follow along and ban single-use plastic bags and put a fee on paper bags. We fully support this bill and think it's absolutely going in the right direction for environmental sustainability. So I'll pass it back to Judith.
So turning to straws, it's always in the top 10 items found during beach cleanups. So I think a straws upon request policy makes sense. We certainly don't, I'm curious about what Paul Burns said. We don't want to tell stores that they have to offer plastic straws if they don't currently, but I think you can work through that issue. I think the most important provision in this bill is actually the polystyrene ban, and let me explain why. Polystyrene is made from the chemical styrene, which is a probable human carcinogen. We've known this for decades, and we are very concerned about styrene leaching into food and beverages. For instance, if you have a hot cup of tea in a polystyrene or styrofoam cup, that's a problem. You're going to get some of the styrene leaching into your tea. So we know that polystyrene is not biodegradable. It lasts in landfills or on the side of the road for over 500 years, and it absolutely is not recyclable. And I really want to emphasize this point. In a laboratory, you can, but in real life, there are not viable polystyrene recycling programs. So as I consult with local governments around the country who are considering polystyrene bans, representatives of the manufacturers say don't ban it, recycle it, but even when the recycling operations are heavily subsidized by the polystyrene industry, they don't last, and that is all outlined in a state Supreme Court decision from New York City, where there now is a polystyrene ban fully in effect in New York City, a city of 8 million people, but it was long fought because the manufacturers kept saying you can recycle it, and ultimately the court looked very closely at that and concluded that is not the case. It's also banned in Albany County, it's banned in the state of California. From a toxics perspective, you absolutely have to keep this in the bill. And also, you know how brittle polystyrene is. So one container gets on the side of the road and it breaks into many, many different pieces. I think your bill is a reasonable and modest approach. The European Union recently banned 10 different single-use plastic items effective 2021. They've banned plastic cutlery, plates, straws, drink stirrers, sticks for balloons, and which maybe is a European thing, I don't see a lot of sticks with balloons. And plastic Q-tips. You know, when you buy a Q-tip, it could be cardboard or it could be plastic. Well, believe it or not, they're showing up in litter. And then the really hard thing is, how do we deal with cigarette butts? If you look at a cigarette, the filter you may think is cotton, it's plastic. And that is a major litter problem. It's kind of the last thing people feel that it's okay to litter. And those filters go down storm drains, they go out into the water, and the filter will break down into many, many different pieces of plastic. They are not cotton. And on climate change, you know, the United Nations tells us we have 12 years to tackle climate change before we experience catastrophic impacts of climate change. I would argue many parts of the world are already experiencing catastrophic impacts from climate change. When I was at EPA, Hurricane Sandy hit, devastated parts of New York and New Jersey. You had Irene. After Maria hit, the governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands called me. I was since left EPA, but I was asked to come down and deal with some of the environmental impacts of Hurricane Maria. Places in the world like the Caribbean are simply not going to be able to handle more and more hurricanes and more intense weather. So while you may be motivated by reducing litter, by cleaning our treasured water bodies, you should also think of this bill, S-113, as an important opportunity to address climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions for Judith or Rudy? Representative McCullough?
Microplastics, is that a different class than microbeads?
Yeah, microplastics are basically little pieces of plastic that are 5 millimeters or less. It's like a grain of sand. Think of that size. And then microbeads are different, including, you know, until President Obama signed a national law on microbeads, they were purposefully added to personal care products.
Yeah. And cigarette filters, is that primarily polystyrene?
It's not polystyrene. I don't know exactly the type of, but I know it's not polystyrene.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Dolan?
Simply, could we get a copy of your presentation? This was helpful, but you had some statistics.
Yes.
Both your presentations were helpful for us to fully understand.
I'd be happy to send it to you. Sorry, I was at a hearing late last night in the Hudson Valley.
Representative Bates?
First, I want to thank you for coming down, or coming up here from Bennington. It's great. Are you guys the organization that goes to our select board meetings and talk about your plastic bags and stuff?
Yeah, I've joined them just about 6 months ago, like last year. Yeah.
It's quite interesting when I hear you guys talk, so. But anyway, thank you for coming.
He's really smart. You should just listen to him and the other Bennington students. And we also launched a project at Bennington College called Beyond Plastics, dedicated to reducing single-use plastic packaging nationwide. And we are a technical resource. We're on social media. Our website will be up next month, and happy to be a resource. And I think your advisory committee also makes good sense. Once you pass this important proposal, let's keep going on extended producer responsibility, the circular economy, a lot of good information out of the European Union, and we're happy to be a technical resource for that body.
Do you have thoughts on the previous witness who said that 2.2 mil, it would just cause increased use of thicker bags?
Yeah, I think he made a good point, and I think you have two ways to address this. Go to 4 mil, or just ban single-use plastic bags altogether and do not state a thickness, and then have a requirement that the bag be reused at least 125 times. There are some communities in the U.S. Virgin Islands, for instance. Some of the supermarkets just went for thicker single-use plastic bags, and that's even worse. So I think the other witness made a really good point. Most of the laws are either 4 mil or silent. So. I also like his point that you could just ban bags altogether. I wouldn't object to that.
So California's 4 mil?
Yes.
So what we got, we asked our legislative council, 2.25 came from New Jersey or Maryland?
Yes.
But the other states don't have statewide, so are these bills that are in process, do you know?
New Jersey is a bill, not a law. California is a law. And then New York just banned plastic bags in the state budget, and they did no mill. They just said no plastic bags.
At point of sale.
At point of sale.
New York.
In New York.
And that's what California has?
No, I think California is 4 mil, but I will double check that for you. I like the way New York did it, because then you don't kind of compete for thicker and thicker plastic bags. Although that reusable orange one is helpful.
Looking for the trash.
You threw that one out. I spared you.
We'd already had it.
But let me reach for one. I think you don't want to ban these. These are actually made from recycled plastic. But I think you can have a requirement that it be reused at least 125 times. Yeah. And you can either go to 4 mil or just silent on the thickness. And what's so crazy is, Louis mentioned how many local bag laws?
345.
345. They're not consistent, and that's why you need a state law. Most of the laws are local, and everyone's recreating the wheel. We're also learning as we go along, but I think a smart statewide law makes a lot of sense.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.
And Cathy Jamieson, I heard the previous witness said something about our paper recycling waiver. Could you clarify that for us?
So last year, at the end of the session, there was provision put into statute that would authorize the agency to allow the disposal of mixed paper. Remember, that was the one that we were having a hard time market, if there were no markets for it. We have received no requests in the past year, and that sunsets this June 30th.
So we never used the waiver?
We never used the waiver. The mixed paper is not being thrown away, but it is at a cost that it is being sent to another facility to be, to be recycled into other materials.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
And then if Dawn would
Just
give a question to the witnesses.
Yeah, just a clarification to try to address your point of not wanting to inadvertently ban that recycled plastic bag. So just trying to figure out that language, if we try to be silent on the size of plastic, you just ban plastic.
You could be silent on the thickness and say all bags sold in Vermont need to be reusable. We'll work on the definition, but essentially reusable at least 125 times. That's going to knock out all of your single-use plastic bags, but I think preserve the reusable bags, even if they're made from plastic.
Okay. So, committee, I just want to make sure everyone is aware that the newest version of S96 is available in hard copy. Laura's going to hand it out right now. We also have Michael O'Grady for after the show to go through that there with us and move into hopefully the possible vote. Here for all right, we'll adjourn.
We in here?
We are in here.
Judith.
As a member of the